No one will bother going to your stupid party for a new job, my mother wrote in the family chat. I read the message, replied understood, and that same day stopped her rent payments and canceled her cards. The next day, I took the car and closed all the accounts in her name. The email arrived while I was in the middle of a video conference, a small notification that would change my life forever. I tried to maintain my composure while the meeting continued, but my heart was beating so hard I was afraid my colleagues could hear it through their headphones. After 5 years of night classes, 3 years of poorly paid internships, and countless failed interviews, it had finally happened. The job of my dreams, a project coordinator position in one of the country's most prestigious sustainable architecture firms. When the call ended, I stared at the screen with a mixture of disbelief and euphoria. I had fought so hard for this moment. While my friends enjoyed their 20s, I divided my time between a grueling job as a waitress and online courses that would allow me to make the professional leap. Entire nights studying after 12-hour shifts, vacations canceled to pay for additional certifications, and all while financially supporting my mother, a responsibility I assumed at 22. The relationship with my mother had always been complicated. When my father passed away 10 years ago, something changed in her. The strong, independent woman I had known transformed into someone constantly needy, always in crisis. At first, it was small loans for the weekly shopping, for an unexpected bill, but over time the temporary help became total dependence. Her ability to generate income seemed to have vanished along with my father, and I, her only daughter, became her safety net. At 25, I was paying her full rent. At 27, I had taken over all her credit cards, and at 30, the age I am now, I managed absolutely all her finances. I bought her a car when hers finally stopped working. I opened accounts in her name that I managed, and even paid her health insurance. All this while struggling to build my own future. In return, I received a constant reminder of how my help was never enough, how her problems were always more important than my achievements, how I somehow owed her all this and more. But that day, with the job offer illuminating my screen, I decided it was time to celebrate. For once, I wanted to share my joy, to feel proud of what I had achieved with so much effort. After the confirmation and an excited call with my best friend, I began planning a small gathering. Nothing extravagant, just a dinner with the closest people to share the moment. I looked at my small but cozy apartment and smiled, thinking about how to transform it for the occasion. I would buy fresh flowers, prepare some appetizers, open a bottle of wine saved for a special occasion. I would only invite my closest circle, my best friend Elena and her partner, my cousin Miguel who had always supported me, 2 colleagues from my current job with whom I had formed a genuine friendship, and my mother. I hesitated when considering inviting her. Our last conversation had ended like so many others, with her minimizing my effort to get interviews. Anyone can send resumes online, and suggesting that I should look for a more realistic job. But she was my mother, and despite everything, a part of me still sought her approval, her pride. Maybe this time would be different. This wasn't just another attempt. It was a concrete, undeniable achievement. I created a family chat group that included my mother, my Aunt Laura, her sister, my cousin Miguel, and 2 other cousins with whom I kept in regular contact. With trembling fingers from excitement, I wrote, "I have incredible news to share. After so much effort, I got the job at Sustainable Global Architecture. I'd love to celebrate with you this Friday with a small dinner at my apartment at 8 p.m. Please confirm if you can come." Congratulatory messages soon arrived. My aunt sent a series of enthusiastic emojis followed by, "I'll be there without fail, darling. So proud of you." Miguel replied with a celebratory gif, and "I always knew you'd do it. Count me in." My other cousins also confirmed, one adding, "Finally, they'll value your talent as you deserve." My mother's message arrived exactly 22 minutes later. I know because I checked the clock several times while waiting, feeling a familiar anxiety building in my chest. When her name finally appeared on the screen, I felt that familiar weight in my stomach. "And no one will bother going to your stupid party for a new job," she wrote in all caps, as if yelling at me digitally. "Everyone has more important things to do than celebrate that you'll now work more hours for barely a little more money." The family chat fell silent for a few eternal seconds. Then my aunt wrote, "Sister, what's wrong with you? This is an important moment for her." Miguel added, "And, with all due respect, this is very important for Anna." But the damage was done. I felt tears starting to form, that familiar mix of shame, anger, and pain that my mother could provoke with just a few words. Years of therapy had taught me to name these feelings, but they didn't hurt any less. My phone kept lighting up with messages of support from others, but I could only see those mocking capital letters. I breathed deeply, left the phone on the table, got up, went to the bathroom, and looked at myself in the mirror. Over the years, I had learned to contain my emotions, not to show how much her words affected me. I had learned to smile and say it's okay when nothing was, to apologize for her behavior to others, to pretend that our relationship was normal. But at that moment, seeing myself in the mirror, something changed. I saw the woman who had fought against all odds, who had worked harder than anyone I knew, who had just landed a job that many more experienced professionals were fiercely competing for. And I realized I didn't deserve this. I didn't deserve to be publicly humiliated at a moment of celebration. I returned to the living room, picked up my phone, and typed a single word in response: understood. I didn't add emojis, explanations, or apologies. Just that cold, calculated word. An acknowledgement of her message, but not an acceptance of her power to hurt me. And as I pressed send, a strange calm washed over me. It was as if something inside me had finally broken, but not in the sense of destruction, but of liberation. I looked at my phone a moment longer, watching the scene mark appear under my message. Then I opened my banking app and, with the same premeditated calmness, stopped the automatic monthly transfer for my mother's rent, scheduled for the next day. Next, I logged into the platform where I managed her credit cards and canceled all payment authorizations. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. Just a crystalline clarity that I had been waiting for years. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in front of my computer in the dim light of my apartment, with only the blue light from the screen illuminating the room. There was no going back. Something fundamental had shifted inside me, as if a switch that had been stuck for years had finally been released. I opened a folder that I had created a long time ago but rarely checked. Mom Documentation, it was titled. It started as a simple file to keep receipts of payments I made to her, but over time it became a detailed record of our dysfunctional relationship, saved emails, screenshots of message conversations, notes on broken promises. A meticulous catalog of manipulation and emotional abuse that I myself had compiled without realizing what it really meant. The first email dated back 8 years. "I just need a small loan until I find a job, honey. I'll pay you back next month." She never did. I kept scrolling. "I can't believe you can't lend me more this month when you spend money on those stupid night classes. If you really loved me, you wouldn't make me beg." A daughter who cares about her mother doesn't put limits on love. Message after message, year after year, I saw how I had normalized the unacceptable, how every time I tried to set a boundary, she demolished it with guilt and manipulation, how I had learned to confuse abuse with love. My therapist was right. For 3 years I had been working with her, trying to understand why I felt responsible for my mother's happiness, why I sacrificed my well-being for hers without receiving gratitude or acknowledgement in return. It's not a healthy relationship, she had told me many times. It's emotional and financial exploitation. Words that sounded too harsh to apply to my own mother, until now. I opened my banking app again and reviewed the transaction history of the last few years. The numbers hit me like a physical blow. The monthly rent, $1,000. The utility bills, approximately $300 each month. Credit card payments that ranged between $500 and $1,200 monthly. Premium health insurance, $410 monthly. The car I bought her 2 years ago, $18,000. Not to mention the sporadic loans for emergencies that were never really emergencies. In total, I had spent more than $150,000 on her over the past 5 years. Money I could have used for my own apartment instead of this small studio, for a full-time master's degree instead of more affordable online courses, for building my own future instead of financing her whims. And the worst part was that she lived as if she were poor. She constantly complained about her financial situation in front of family and friends, about how she barely survived on her pension, about how I barely helped her. She had built an entire identity of an abandoned mother while I worked double shifts to support her. The pattern was so clear now. My mother didn't just depend on me financially, she depended on controlling me emotionally. Every achievement of mine was a threat. Every step towards independence was met with crises, sudden emergencies, or mysterious worsening of health problems that doctors never seemed to find. I poured myself a glass of wine and called Elena. It was 1:30 in the morning, but I knew she would understand. "I'm finally doing it," I said when she answered sleepily. I didn't need to explain more. Elena had witnessed my struggle for years. She had dried my tears after countless confrontations, encouraged me to seek therapy. "Are you okay?" she asked, now fully awake. "Better than ever," I replied, and I meant it. I already canceled the cards and the automatic payments. What else? Elena knew me well enough to know I wouldn't stop there. "Tomorrow I'll pick up the car. It's in my name, it always has been. And I'll close all the accounts I manage for her. Have you talked to your therapist about this?" "I have an appointment tomorrow at 10. "But Elena, this isn't impulsive. It's something I should have done years ago." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "I'm proud of you," she finally said. "And I'll be there for whatever you need." After hanging up, I spent the next few hours meticulously documenting every account, every card, every service I had been paying. I made copies of every document that showed the car was in my name, that the accounts had been opened by me to manage her money, that the credit cards were under my responsibility. Everything was perfectly legal. I wasn't stealing anything. I was simply stopping giving what was mine away. At 7 a.m., after barely an hour of restless sleep, I dressed with determination. Black pants, white shirt, blazer. Clothes that made me feel strong, professional. Clothes of someone who was taking control of her life. My first destination was the bank. I had an appointment at 9 a.m. with a financial advisor, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, who listened patiently as I explained that I needed to close several accounts and modify my banking authorizations. "May I ask the reason?" he said with the delicacy of someone who knows that these situations are usually complicated. "I'm ending an unsustainable financial relationship," I replied, surprised by my own calmness. "I've been fully supporting my mother for years, and I can't and don't want to do it anymore." He nodded without judgment. "I understand. Let's review each account to make sure everything is done correctly." An hour later, I left the bank with a feeling of lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The joint accounts closed, my authorizations to manage her finances revoked, new accounts exclusively in my name with passwords that only I knew. At 11 a.m., after an intense but validating session with my therapist, I went to my mother's apartment. I knew she would be at her Pilates class until 1 p.m., which gave me enough time. I used the key I still had, the same one I had used countless times to bring her groceries, medications, or just visit her, and I went directly to the garage. The blue Volkswagen was exactly where she always left it, spotless, shiny, with less than 30,000 kilometers. A car that I paid for in full, that was registered in my name, and that she drove as if it were a right, not a privilege. I put my personal belongings that were still in the apartment in the trunk, left the apartment keys on the kitchen table next to a short and concise note, and left. The note simply said, "The rent is paid until the end of the month." The car is in my name, and I need it. All accounts and cards that I managed have been closed. It's time we both lived our own lives. Anna. As I drove back to my apartment, my phone began to vibrate incessantly. I had silenced it, but I could see the notifications piling up. Calls from my mother, messages in the family chat, more calls. I let it ring. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel the need to respond immediately, to calm her anxiety, to solve her problems. For the first time, I was putting my needs first. I got home, parked the car in my assigned but rarely used spot, and went up to my apartment. I opened the windows, letting the fresh morning breeze renew the atmosphere. I put on music, something I rarely did for fear of not hearing if my phone rang with some emergency from my mother. I sat on my small sofa and finally looked at my phone. 15 missed calls, 23 messages. The first, sent at 11:42 a.m. Where's my car? What does this note mean? The following ones escalated in urgency and aggressiveness. Accusations of theft of a car that was legally mine, threats to call the police, who would only confirm that everything was legal, emotional manipulation about how I was killing her with worry. The most recent, sent just 5 minutes ago, I can't believe my own daughter is doing this to me after all I've sacrificed for you. I breathed deeply and blocked her number. Not permanently, I just needed space to think, to strengthen my resolve before facing the inevitable emotional hurricane that was coming. I looked around my small apartment and, for the first time, saw possibilities instead of limitations. Without my mother's expenses, I could afford a bigger place. I could increase my savings for the future. I could finally live my own life. I received a message from Elena. Everything okay? Want company? Yes, I replied to everything. The storm broke exactly as I expected. Despite blocking my mother's number, she found other ways to contact me. Emails, messages through other relatives. She even showed up at my current job yelling in the lobby that I had stolen her possessions until security had to escort her out. Every attempt at contact followed the same predictable pattern that my therapist had called the wheel of abuse. First, explosive anger and accusations. Then, when that didn't work, emotional manipulation and victimhood. I'm sick. How can you do this to me? What will everyone think of you treating your mother this way? Finally, when nothing else worked, empty promises of change. We can fix this. Things will be different. Just give me a chance. I maintained my silence, not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. My therapist had explained that any response, however minimal, would restart the cycle. I needed distance to heal. 3 days after picking up the car, I received a call from my Aunt Laura. I breathed deeply before answering, preparing to defend my actions. Anna, darling, her voice sounded cautious. Your mother is quite upset. She says you've taken everything from her. Can we talk about this? Of course, I replied calmly. But before you form an opinion, there's something I need to show you. That afternoon, we met at a quiet cafe. I brought my laptop and the documents I had meticulously organized. For 2 hours, I showed her everything. The bank statements proving I had been paying my mother's rent for years, the utility bills in my name, the car contract clearly under my ownership, the emails and messages documenting the pattern of emotional and financial abuse. I watched as her expression gradually changed from confusion to horror. I had no idea, she whispered finally. She always says you barely help her occasionally, that she lives on the bare minimum from her pension. She's been lying for years, I replied without emotion. Not just about the money, but about our entire relationship. But why didn't you say anything before? Because I was ashamed. Because I thought it was my responsibility to take care of her. Because I was afraid no one would believe me. Laura reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I believe you now. That conversation opened the floodgates. Laura talked to Miguel, who also met with me to see the evidence. He contacted other relatives. Little by little, the truth spread through our family. The reactions were mixed. Some, like Laura and Miguel, supported me unconditionally. Others kept their distance, uncomfortable with taking sides in what they considered a private family matter. A couple of older uncles insisted that a daughter should always take care of her mother, no matter what. But even they were silenced when I showed them the concrete numbers of what I had spent on her while working strenuous shifts and studying. Throughout those weeks, my mother kept trying to regain control. When she saw that the family was beginning to understand my version, she changed tactics. She began contacting my friends, my colleagues, even my current boss, telling a twisted story where I had abandoned her in her old age after years of sacrifices she made for me. Fortunately, the people closest to me knew the truth, or at least enough to doubt her version. My boss, a perceptive woman who had seen signs of our toxic dynamic on previous occasions, simply told me any family communication should be kept out of the workplace. Don't worry about this. Friday of the celebration arrived. I had considered canceling it, fearing that my mother might appear and cause a scene. But Elena insisted, "Don't let her take this away from you too. You've worked too hard for this moment." I transformed my small apartment as best I could, fresh flowers on the table, scented candles, a selection of tapas I had prepared the night before, good wine, not the most expensive, but definitely better than what I used to be able to afford. At 8 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. Elena and her partner, with a bottle of champagne and genuine smiles. Then Miguel and his girlfriend, my 2 coworkers, and, to my surprise, my Aunt Laura, who hadn't confirmed her attendance after our conversation. "I couldn't miss this," she said, hugging me tightly. "I'm so proud of you for everything." The night passed with a lightness I hadn't experienced in years, genuine laughter, conversations that didn't need to be monitored for fear of offending someone, congratulations without a conditional, but at the end. It was a small gathering, but it represented something huge, my new life, my authentic relationships, my freedom. We toasted to my new job, to new beginnings, to the future. And although no one mentioned it explicitly, we also toasted to my courage to break the cycle of abuse. My mother didn't show up, thanks to Miguel's foresight, who had told her the celebration had been canceled when she called him to find out the details. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of peace I almost didn't recognize. My phone displayed a message from an unknown number. It was my mother from a new phone. "I've had to move to a smaller apartment. I've had to sell jewelry to pay the first month. I'm using public transport because I don't have a car. I hope you're happy with what you've achieved." For a moment, I felt that old pang of guilt, but then I remembered the previous night, the genuine joy, the healthy relationships. I remembered everything I had sacrificed for years. I simply replied, "I'm glad you're learning to be independent. I wish you the best." Then I blocked the new number. It's been 3 months since then. I started my new job, which turned out to be even better than I expected. I moved to a more spacious apartment with a small balcony where I grow aromatic herbs. I'm saving for a trip I always wanted to take but could never afford. I occasionally receive news of my mother through other relatives. Apparently, she got a part-time job at a local store. She's learning, for the first time in decades, to support herself. Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever rebuild our relationship on healthier foundations. I don't know. What I do know is that I will no longer confuse abuse with love, nor personal sacrifice with filial responsibility. As my therapist told me in our last session, boundaries are not punishments, they are acts of self-love. And finally, after 30 years, I'm learning to love myself enough to defend myself. Truly healthy relationships never demand that you give up your dignity. Respect and genuine love encourage you to grow, not diminish you. Sometimes the bravest act is not enduring abuse out of loyalty, but setting clear boundaries out of self-love. Remember that you cannot save others from the consequences of their own actions without sinking yourself in the process. Emotional freedom begins when you understand that deserving respect is not selfishness, but the first step towards more authentic and balanced relationships.